I'm Kirk Coleman, and you're watching The Cat Cave.
Whether you're in North or South Carolina or anywhere else in the world, enter the Cat Cave with Ryan Frick and Shannon Smith to listen to your favorite Carolina Panthers podcast as a part of the Keep Pounding Podcast Network, where you can find shows like Embrace Debate and Inside the Vault, powered by the Fans First Sports Network, and on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel, where you can also watch Believe in Panthers with Desmond Johnson and Jonathan Stewart. It's your guy, Ryan Frick, here alongside Shannon Smith. It's been a couple weeks since we've seen Shannon. Shannon, what's up, bud? How's everything?
Everything is good. Sorry for the past 2 weeks being away. I had some job training. The job training went very well. We all are certified instructors for the Department of Adult Corrections. We had specialty training, and me and my 10 other classmates passed. So good stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah, we didn't care that you were gone. We had a great show 2 weeks ago with the last show we had with Desmond Johnson is probably the longest show we ever had. But what a great conversation! Thanks to our producer Des for joining us on that show. Mm-hmm. I'm sure the audience is wondering what the heck is a Carolina Panthers podcast going to talk about, considering that we're ahead of the NFC and AFC, the conference championship weekend in the NFL, and the Panthers are nowhere to be found at 5-12 on the season. But we do have a discussion that I think we should have, because I had it over on my other podcast, Tap Outs and Touchdowns. So I wanted to sort of present this conversation because I believe this is the third or fourth year that the Carolina Panthers would have been in the top 10 in draft picks. Last year, obviously, we didn't have a number one pick due to the trade for Bryce Young, but we would have been otherwise. And so I wanted to pose the question, Shannon, of the teams drafting in the top 10, we're talking the Browns, the Giants, the Titans, etc. Sort of like, who's got the worst situation headed into next season and who's in the best situation headed into next season? Now, there have been some developments over the last couple of days regarding coaching staffs. And that kind of played into like who's in a better or worse situation, considering the fact that for the first time in what seems like half a decade, the Carolina Panthers don't have a lot of turnover on the coaching staff, nor do they have a lot of turnover on the roster regarding key players. Bryce Young is still under contract going into his third year. Xavier Legette, obviously a second-year player. Jatavian Sanders, so on and so forth. Why can't I say his name? Chuba Hubbard was extended right before the end of the season. But when you look, so there's stability there with the Carolina Panthers. And I don't mean to sort of give too much away, but when you look at teams going into the offseason, you've got the New England Patriots, who have obviously restaffed with Mike Vrabel as the head coach. And for the third time, Josh McDaniels is the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. You look at the New York Jets, who I believe earlier today, as of the day of this recording, hired former Detroit Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn as their next head coach. The Chicago Bears, drafting in 10th, has hired Ben Johnson, the former Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, as their next head coach. But there's still some things to go on with these teams in the top 10. Shannon, let's start off with the best. Who do you think is in the best situation of the teams drafting inside the top 10 headed into next season?
Looking at the top 10 right now, and I hate to sound like a homer, but I think the Panthers are in a very good position, I believe. They don't have to look for a franchise quarterback as of right now. They're bringing back coaching staff, and they've got players from this past season that they're building off of, and had good productivity out of some of these players. Chuba Hubbard's going to be back. They shut him down for the season to rest him up for next season. Hopefully, we get Sanders back in time. The only thing that I will say is that hopefully Carolina does something with the defense a little bit, I believe. And then, adding other pieces to the offensive line. Other than that, they don't have to start from scratch, if you will. So that's a good thing because with the drafts of the past, the Panthers have had to start from scratch. They've had to build it. This time around, they really don't have to build it, or at least we hope so. But as of right now, I think the Panthers of these 10 teams have the better um, outlook on the draft.
Yeah, listen, I'm gonna be in the same boat with you there. And again, not to sound like a homer, this is a Carolina Panthers show, but when you look at the other teams, even though the New York Giants are basically kind of coming back with their coaching staff, they are looking for a new quarterback, right? Like Daniel Jones, who got paid all that money, uh, and that's part of the reason why they didn't bring Saquon Barkley back. Obviously, making the worst possible decision. But yeah, I mean, they're probably gonna be looking at a quarterback in the draft. I mean, they're drafting third, and despite the fact that I think this is gonna be the worst quarterback draft in quite some time, more than likely the Giants are going to get a quarterback here. The Titans are in shambles. I mean, 2 years removed from Mike Vrabel, they don't look great. I mean, you can see why they were in the mix of the AFC South for so many years, and with Derrick Henry gone this year, you saw how absolutely atrocious Tennessee was. You don't know what direction they're going in the draft. And we can sort of make an argument for everybody, right? Like I think you can make an argument for the New England Patriots being in a decent position. Like I think Jared Mayo got a bad deal in New England. I think that I don't believe Robert Kraft wanted him to be the coach at all, but because he was contractually obligated to do so, he had to give him a shot. There were moments throughout the season where the Patriots looked like they might be building something. Drake May had some great games the last week of the season. Joe Mixon looks like this is the time to trade away Joe Mixon to a team who's desperate enough to get a quarterback. I mean, why not? Why not trade Joe Milton to the Tennessee Titans? I mean, Joe Milton played in Tennessee in college. He's got an arm, he's got legs. Like if you're truly sold on Drake May, now is the time. You're not going to ever get as much as you can for Joe Milton or the New England Patriots. But like, yeah, they're going to be restaffing. Mike Vrabel was asked if he was going to have a run first team in New England. And I believe, I don't remember these exact words or the exact quote, but something along the lines of, did you see what we had in Tennessee? Of course, we're going to be a run first team when you've got a guy like Derrick Henry, but he wasn't committal on what the offense was going to look like in New England. But I think Vrabel's a better coach than he was given credit for. I mean, despite having Derrick Henry on those teams, I mean, he took Tennessee to the playoffs and competed for a division championship with guys like Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. So I think the New England Patriots are in good shape. But like you said, I think the Carolina Panthers are as far as the top 10 draft picks, are in the best shape. You can make the argument for Chicago with Ben Johnson going to coach Caleb Williams. I'm still not sold on Caleb Williams. And so there's more to be said there. But the fact that there's not coaching turnover, a lot of the pieces are there. You're gonna have to add to this roster. Like you're gonna have to add some pieces regarding pass rush and linebacker to be able to stop the run. Maybe add some more weapons on offense to alleviate some of the pressure on guys like Adam Thielen and Bryce Young, Chuba Hubbard for that matter too. I mean, we've got Jonathan Brooks coming off his second ACL injury. The Panthers fired part of the training staff because of the way that they handled the ACL injury from Jonathan Brooks. So in a time where I thought that it might be time for the Panthers to move on from Miles Sanders, when Chuba Hubbard was sat down at the end of the year, Miles Sanders came out and looked pretty good. So I think the Panthers are in good shape. Now, having said that, they are drafting in the top 10. I don't think that going into the offseason, if they add all the right pieces, that all of a sudden they're going to be contending for a Super Bowl. But the NFC South is a very winnable division. I mean, the winner of the division this year went, I believe, 9-7 or 9-8, 10-7 did the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think and the Panthers knocked out some teams that were fighting for playoff spots down the stretch, which showed the lack of quit in this team. And I think the worst owner in sports is finally taking a step back to allow his coach and his GM to do their jobs. And hopefully that continues for the Panthers. Now, when you look on the other side of things, Shannon, I'm gonna give my thoughts on who I think is in the worst situation headed into next season, and I think you have to look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, granted, 3 years ago, they looked like a favorite to sort of pull away and establish themselves as a player in the AFC and in the AFC South. When you've got a guy like Trevor Lawrence, it was I believe was he number one overall quarterback or number one player. I know he was a first round draft pick, a top 5 draft pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was expected to be the franchise quarterback, better than Blake Bortles, for Jacksonville. But unfortunately, and this year they drafted what could be a future All-Pro wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr., who had some phenomenal games. The running game sort of struggled with Travis Etienne being unable to stay healthy a good bit. But Tank Bigsby has come out and had some big games. So when you look at some of the pieces on offense, you think Jacksonville's set up for success. But they let go of Doug Peterson 2 weeks ago. Considering the fact that like the team has sort of been a dumpster fire for the last couple of years, when you've got some decent pieces on that team, you sort of saw that coming. But I think the biggest problem for me is that, and it's not because it's the Khan family and Tony Khan is the son of the owner, Shad Khan, and they like to just kind of blow money on stuff that they don't need to. And that's a wrestling reference for those of you who know what I'm talking about. But the idea is that there were thoughts that Ben Johnson, again, heralded former offensive coordinator, now head coach for the Chicago Bears. It was basically said that Ben Johnson was a favorite to take the Jacksonville Jaguars job. And there were some rumor mill going around about the fact that if Ben Johnson wasn't okay with the way things were in Jacksonville, as far as the GM was concerned, that he would go elsewhere, and he ultimately did. And then I believe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator earlier today, if not yesterday, said something along those lines. He pulled himself from consideration for the head coaching job. And then news came out earlier today, this would be Wednesday, that the Jaguars finally relieved the general manager of his his general managing duties. So, like, I just think that, like, the dysfunction, the fact that they couldn't find a coach or a guy that wanted to take the head coaching job. So now the Khan family decides to, decides to get rid of the GM that was preventing them from hiring a head coach. It just seems very reactionary. It seems sort of impulsive. And I don't know if that's great, considering one of the most impulsive general managers in all of football, Jerry Jones, has not made the NFC Championship game more recently than any other team in the NFC East. I'm looking at the Washington Commanders playing against the Philadelphia Eagles this weekend. I'm talking about the New York Giants winning a couple Super Bowls since the last time the Dallas Cowboys played for the NFC Championship. So, nevertheless, my long-winded way of saying that I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are probably in the worst shape that you can be in, all things considered, essentially because of the lack of consistency and the impulsive nature of the organization, considering that, like, I mean, they're a year or two away of having to make a decision on Travis. I'm not sorry, Travis Etienne, on Sunshine. And I just said his name, Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence.
So yeah, I think the Jags could be back in this position sooner rather than later. Shannon, what say you? Who's in the worst situation of the top 10 draft picks headed into next season?
Well, I do love the wrestling reference to Tony Khan, and I love the Sunshine reference.
Sunshine.
The Trevor Lawrence. I mean, for real, I'm pretty sure he's had that given to him his whole life. I know he probably has. He's probably got tired of it. He probably thought he was going to shed it when the NFL came.
He looks like Rhea Ripley's older brother. Let's be honest. Like when Rhea Ripley came on the scene, she had blonde hair.
Yes.
Kind of long blonde hair, kind of looking like the Charlotte Flair type, and wanted to be herself, and that's who she became. But, like, tell me Trevor Lawrence doesn't look like he could be the older brother of Rhea Ripley. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off, man. I had to throw that out there. Sorry.
Man. I believe it, though. You're absolutely correct. I like it. But yeah, he thought he was gonna shed that, with a few wins, getting the Jacksonville Jaguars to the playoffs, but they've sputtered. The Doug Peterson firing, was long overdue. And their GM, I didn't know that about their GM. That was very good homework right there. I did not know that about their GM being as impulsive as he was. That does look like a very, very dark place to be. I thought the Urban Meyer situation was worse than that, but evidently it is not. So, with that being said, I'm going to go against you and say that the Raiders are in a bad spot. And the reason for that is 1 week they didn't get rid of Antonio Pierce, and then later on the next week they got rid of him. I think, like you said, Jerome Mayo got a raw deal with New England. They fulfilled the contract, but they only fulfilled it for 1 year. And that was very, very crafty work there.
Oh, I like the wordplay. Oh, look at you.
I've been waiting on that for about a week. I've been waiting on it for a week. I was going to get it on somebody's podcast, but I got it right there, though. And I finally got it here. So, yeah, that was very good work there by Robert Kraft. He knows what he's doing. He's been in the game for a long time. He knows. He gave him 1 year, and he said, guess what? We fulfilled our contract. So there was no breach of contract, and now you got to go. And they wanted Mike Vrabel anyway. They wanted that dude anyway. That's who they wanted from the get-go. Of course, he was a part of the Super Bowl team. He has a legacy with the New England Patriots. So, of course, they're going to get him. But I think AP got a raw deal with the Raiders because, he took the team halfway through the year, and the team and the fans wanted him. Then this year he gets a full year. The man didn't have a set quarterback for the year. He was wavering back and forth quarterbacks. He ends up losing his job for that. And that's the way it goes. It's the way of the world in the NFL. But the reason why they're in a bad spot is because I'm sorry, not the Oakland Raiders. I'm a little older. Sorry about that. I'm used to saying that. But the Las Vegas Raiders, everybody knows they need a quarterback. And they're not going to get one because either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders is going to be taken beforehand. And I'm with you on this one. This quarterback class does not look like a very good class. Will Howard will be coming out. Clint Ewers, Dylan Gabriel. I really don't see a lot of those guys being franchise guys. I could be wrong. They look like mid, second, third rounders. I mean, with all this talk of the NFL, of college football not developing quarterbacks for the NFL and getting them ready for the NFL, that's a debate that started happening this year. I don't know how long that's been in the making, but this is something that's being talked about this year. I find it kind of weird, but then looking at a lot of college football, their offenses are so different towards the NFL. So I can see the parallels there. But the Raiders need a quarterback. They're not going to get one. They need other pieces. They've got a very good tight end. Their offense is not a bad offense. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to who's under center for the Las Vegas Raiders. Unfortunately, they need a man under center. Free agency might be good to them, might not be. But all in all, I think AP got a raw deal. I think the Raiders are going to be beg, borrowing, stealing for a quarterback, especially playing in the AFC West, where it's quarterback friendly. So I think the Raiders are in a very, very tough spot here in the draft at pick number 6.
Yeah, I want to throw it out there too. I think Antonio Pierce, I'm with you. I think you got a raw deal. Considering that the Detroit Lions are struggling, or not struggling, but considering they're looking for new coordinators, I think Antonio Pierce should be priority number 1 to go out and get as a new defensive coordinator in Detroit, especially considering that Max Crosby was not happy with the departure of Antonio Pierce, and the fact that I believe he played in Michigan, and so there were rumors that if the Lions were going to trade for a defensive end to not only complement Aiden Hutchinson, but to replace Aiden Hutchinson when Aiden Hutchinson was injured earlier this season, the name Max Crosby got thrown around as part of a wish list for Lions fans. But I think if you're talking about the Raiders and Antonio Pierce and where he could wind up, if Pierce winds up in Detroit, I think there's an opportunity for now Max Crosby to wind up in Detroit. Crosby wanted to retire a Raider, but I don't know how he feels about the organization anymore, right? So not to mention, there again, more speculation about head coaching jobs in the NFL. Not only are the Raiders, but the Cowboys are also looking for a new head coach. And so there's rumors floating around that Deion Sanders could wind up in either place. considering that he wants to sort of influence on where Shador, his son, goes to the NFL. And so the idea was that Deion finds his way to Las Vegas, turns out to be the head coach to find a way to get Shador in Vegas, and you get the experiment there, or he winds up in Dallas. There's also the thought that now that they're in a head coaching, I believe that Vegas just hired a new general manager today. I could be wrong about that, but the fact of the matter is that I thought, if anything, if Tom Brady wanted to end his broadcasting career, I don't think anybody would be too upset about it, and he could go be the general manager of the Raiders. And there's still speculation that Bill Belichick, who hasn't coached a single game for the North Carolina Tar Heels, could pay his $1 million buyout and go be the next head coach of the Raiders, hired by Tom Brady. So yeah, listen, you can make the argument that the Raiders are right there with the Jacksonville Jaguars as far as being the worst situation headed into next season. And unfortunately for both of those squads, I think they could both be picking in the top 10 again next season. But then again, if you look at these teams, we're talking Titans, Browns, Giants, Patriots, Jags, Raiders. There's a lot of teams that could be turning around and drafting in the top 10 again next season. You talk about the AFC West. I mean, you're looking at the Chiefs, the Broncos who made the playoffs this year, the Chargers who made the playoffs this year. So that's a competitive division. As good as the NFC North was this season, the AFC West was not much worse, not far off. And you still at least got an AFC West team in the playoffs. Speaking of which, again, we know the Panthers are sort of out of playoff talk here because we were out of the playoffs in week 14, 15, whatever it was. We are at conference championship weekend, and there have been some surprising outcomes in these playoffs, albeit some lopsided victories or some upsets. So, Shannon, I want to ask you on your return to the show, what games or what game has been the most surprising to you in this NFL offseason?
No, I must say it's got to be the Detroit Lions and the Washington Commanders. That was a game that was very, very surprising to me. I thought the Lions had it. I didn't think that the storybook would keep going with the Washington Commanders. I didn't think the story would keep going. I didn't see the going into Detroit and winning, but it happened. It was a surprising game. It was a big game, but also another game that was very surprising to me was the Ravens and the Bills. I had the Ravens winning that game. I felt like the running attack was going to do it for the Ravens. I didn't think the Bills could do it, but the Bills are showing, and Josh Allen is also showing that he might be MVP this year, which I'm going to pose a question at the end of this right here. I'm going to let you say what you got to say, but I want to pose a question at the end of this because I've been having a discussion about this, but I'm going to leave that to after you say yours. But those are the two games that surprised me.
I'll tell you, listen, as far as the Lions Commanders go, I believe it was last season where the Dolphins were outscoring everybody, outpacing everybody. And I believe that because it was why I predicted them to play in the Super Bowl this year. Yeah. But they got banged up and they got injured a lot down the stretch. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the Lions injuries finally caught up with them. I believe they started 30 different players on defense this year. They were in a shootout with the Buffalo Bills in Detroit late in the season. They looked like they were able to overcome it with a commanding win over the Vikings until we saw the Vikings get knocked out in the first round. So that was a little surprising to me with the way that the Rams were able to handle the Vikings in the wild card weekend. But I wasn't so much surprised about the Lions because I felt like it was going to catch up with them eventually. And unfortunately, Jared Goff played his worst game in the last week of the season for the Detroit Lions, alongside of the fact that the defense was a mash unit out there. So surprising that they couldn't overcome. I'm more surprised about Jared Goff's performance in that game than I am about the Lions losing that game. I figured at some point it was coming. But I'll tell you, I already mentioned it. I'm more surprised about the fact that the Vikings won 14 games and sort of like laid over for the LA Rams in the wild card weekend. That to me was the most shocking. I mean, As far as like game outcomes, I'm not really surprised about any other game outcomes. You're not surprised. You're not shocked that the Chiefs beat the Texans. You're not shocked that the Eagles beat the Rams, considering that
No,
was a really entertaining game.
it was.
And the Bills Ravens to me was sort of a toss up. I'm more surprised about the fact that the point spreads were so big on some of these games. Like I believe the Lions were a 9.5-point favorite over the Commanders, and the Chiefs had like an 8.5-point spread against the Texans. Now they covered that spread, so kudos to them. But like you talk about another surprise, like the Kansas City Chiefs have won games this season on defense, and in their game against the Texans, they held Houston to 14, but they only scored 23. And this is now granted, this is their first game back since Christmas Day, but they have all their weapons on offense. I assumed that they would put up at least 30 points, and they did not do it. So that was a little surprising to me as well. Shannon, pose that question to me. I'm curious to what it is.
Okay, what it is we've been talking about MVPs. Like me and a few of my buddies have been talking about the MVP. We're kind of the stalemate of who is going to win MVP this year. Now, let's be honest. The MVP may be picked at the end of the season like they usually say. But are you sure? Are you sure that it's being picked if there's not an influence of the playoffs in there somehow, some way? So my question is, would you rather have one MVP for the whole year, like the end of the regular season, or would you like to have a regular season MVP and a playoff MVP in the NFL?
So I actually had this conversation with Banker Bill over on Tap Outs and Touchdowns, and I am not opposed to having multiple awards in the NFL like postseason. So if you look at college football and the format they have all sorts of rewards for like positional players. You got the Doak Walker Award that goes to your best running back in college football, the Biletnikoff Award that goes to the best wide receiver. And Banker Bill said, "Oh, do you want to give them participation trophies?" And I'm like, "Yeah," because I mean the Pro Bowl doesn't mean anything anymore.
No, not at all.
The All Pro team is so short that like there's a lot of players that are deserving of being on the All Pro team that don't make it.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, listen, I wouldn't be opposed to a regular season MVP and a playoff MVP. I mean, you've got MVPs of individual games. So why not do an MVP of the postseason, like the year that Joe Flacco went crazy en route to the Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl victory? I mean, it got Joe Flacco paid and crippled the Ravens for a decade. So, but he was the MVP of the playoffs that year. Yeah, I mean, I'm still in the minority that I think Saquon Barkley deserves the MVP over both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
But I still, as much as the award could probably go to Josh Allen at this point, Lamar Jackson is a Mark Andrews drop away from an potential overtime victory over the Bills. So my concern is the fact that like you've had co-MVPs in the league before, and I think at some point you're going to have to bring that back when you've got players that are just equally as valuable to their teams and to the league. Regarding their production and stuff like that. So, I'm not against having postseason a playoff MVP and a regular season MVP because I'm also in the thought of maybe they have the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. It has nothing to do with football, but it's an award named after Walter Payton. So why not have, I don't know, the Emmitt Smith or the Barry Sanders best running back award and the Jerry Weiss wide receiver award or the I'm trying to think of the best tight end. I wouldn't call it the Gronk and definitely wouldn't call it the Aaron Hernandez award. The like the Kellen Winslow best tight end award, the Kellen Winslow award, something like that. So I think that granted you don't want to give participation trophies, but like if you give something to play for, like give it again, these guys are making millions of dollars.
Right.
But have a monetary award for it and have their name in the record books as a multi-time NFL best, wide receiver award, because like it's at this point, the MVP is never going to go to a non-quarterback ever again. No. And despite the fact that the NFL, focuses so much on that position that like, I feel like the other positions, the other players in the league get overshadowed. And so I'm all for participation trophies in the NFL and given more recognition, especially when it comes to Hall of Fame resumes, right?
Yes.
There's guys like Dan Marino who's in the Hall of Fame that never won a Super Bowl.
Exactly.
He won a couple of MVPs. So, or at least I think he won one MVP. I know he was, I believe, a co-MVP one season during a year where one of the 7 running backs in NFL history ran for 2,000. So, nevertheless, I'm with you. I'm assuming that you agree with me, and that's why you posed the question.
I do. I do because right now you're looking at Saquon Barkley. He ran for 200 yards he ran 200 yards last week. You're looking at what Josh Allen has done. These guys going into the NFC and NFC championship games. Who knows what they could do this coming weekend? So I think it's only right, and you hit the nail on the head because we're not going to see somebody outside of a quarterback winning the MVP. The last non-quarterback to win the MVP was AP in 2012, and that seems like light years away. And then the last defensive player to win the NFL MVP was Lawrence Taylor in the year I was born in 1986. So this is the tide is turning in the league. I get it; it's a passing league. I understand, but with that being said, there's greatness all around us in the league. Why not capitalize on it? Why not highlight it? Because Saquon Barkley's had a great year. Was close to breaking the rushing record, although that made some people feel some type of way because it was 17 games that he did it. But he had it in the least carries. But he did it with least carries.
I'm gonna make. We got to move on. We're gonna predict the. We're gonna pick the AFC and NFC championship game. This is the last thought that I'm gonna make on the subject. If you do something during the season that deliberately makes it so that EA Sports adds it to a video game, you should automatically have your name attached to the MVP, whether or not it's deserved or whatever the case is. But like Randy Moss was the first ever 100 overall in Madden. He should have been a co-MVP that year.
Yes.
Saquon Barkley, the only reason he didn't hit 2,000 yards is because they sat him down. But his reverse hurdle and the incredible season is deserving of a co-MVP spot. But this weekend we do have a couple of games, neither of which involve the Carolina Panthers. But let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's start off in the NFC side of things. The 6th seed Washington Commanders have done the unthinkable, and their rookie quarterback has led them to the NFC Championship game to take on the 2 seed Philadelphia Eagles, who are a 6-point favorite this Sunday. 3:00 kickoff over on Fox. Shannon, who you got? Commanders and Eagles.
Now let's give a nod to the unanimous offensive rookie of the year, Jaden Daniels. It's unanimous. Nobody else is better than him as an offensive rookie. He's done very, very well. The Commanders have had a turnaround by getting rid of their old owner, their old GM, their old head coach, and got a new quarterback. They got new everything. And they go to the NFC Championship. See what happens when you cut the cancer out? It's wonderful. Yes. So give it to Washington. But unfortunately, it ends with Philadelphia. Philadelphia's defense has played incredible. They have the man Saquon Barkley running the football like he is on fire. Jalen Hurts and the tush push. He probably won't need it in this game. I don't think he will. Give it to the Eagles. Give me the Eagles. It's hard to beat a team. You meet 3 times. This is the rubber match because they're 1-1, right? I think they are.
I believe so, yeah.
So this is the rubber match right here. This is for all the marbles. So it's going to be a barn burner. It's going to be a fight, but I think the Eagles will escape by 9 points.
Yeah, I think the Eagles, when you look at the defenses that the Commanders have had to play against the Lions and now the Eagles, it's a tough road to go through the number 1 and the number 2 seeds en route to the Super Bowl. And unfortunately, the Commanders are going to finally hit a good defense. Like after the Eagles lost both coordinators, again, not to keep flexing myself and sort of promoting my own show, but Banker Bill and I talked about the fact that we thought the Eagles window was closed.
Yes.
And I believe they reopened it with the signing of Saquon Barkley. And thanks to that 2-headed attack in Barkley and Hurts and all the slew of wide receivers they have on that team and the fact that it took a year to get all the Philadelphia Bulldogs ready on the defensive side of the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they finally done it, and I think the Eagles go to the Super Bowl as your NFC champions. Now, the second game takes place. It is another rematch. This is going to be the most like talked about game probably in Bills history, is the Buffalo Bills, the 2 seed, goes to Kansas City to take on the 1 seed. The Chiefs are a 2-point favorite at home. I'll start us off here. The Bills were able to beat the Bills were able to beat the Chiefs earlier this season. And as after Patrick Mahomes shook the hand of Josh Allen, he walked off the field complaining, dropping expletives and this, that, and the other. And unfortunately, the Bills are all too familiar with getting this close to tasting that championship trophy and falling short. And this is, I believe, their 4th attempt to get past this point to make it to the Super Bowl. Obviously, infamously in the 1990s, they went to 4 straight Super Bowls and have a whopping 0 Super Bowl championships. They're like the Atlanta Braves of the 90s with 13 division championships and 1 World Series, and that pains me to say too as a Braves fan. I'll tell you, I think the Chiefs win the game. I'm rooting for the Bills, to be clear. I don't want to see Patrick Mahomes back in there, but I believe, and somebody said it on social media, they have been stitching the three-peat banner since the end of last season. If there was ever a time to and this is a whole nother conversation for another show, if there was ever a time to investigate the difference in the way that the officials look at quarterbacks, I don't think you could argue, and even though he disagrees the fact that he gets favorable calls, we saw Jared Goff get laid out and almost concussed during an interception return last season that a rules expert came on and said this should have been a penalty. That should have been called back, and it wasn't called back. But Patrick Mahomes can flop a la LeBron James going out of bounds and draw a penalty. He can wait till the last second to slide. If they're going to ban the fake slide like they did after Kenny Pickett did in college, they need to stop protecting quarterbacks who slide late. And then we might see a different Patrick Mahomes. But then again, Cam Newton used to complain about getting hit and getting hit late and all that stuff. And but the difference is if you switch positions, Cam Newton and Patrick Mahomes, at least Mahomes is getting the calls, right? So I like the Bill. I would like to see the Bills win this game. I don't have a dog in the fight because I don't want to see the Commanders win after beating the Lions, and I definitely don't want to see the Eagles win. All right, like the Eagles have the worst fans in the league, and I don't want to see another rendition of showing Taylor Swift after every timeout. I don't want to see Travis Kelce propose and retire at the end of this game to be in the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I think the Chiefs win it, unfortunately. I think we get a rematch of 2 years ago, Eagles and Chiefs, but I want the Bills to win. So, Shannon, what say you? Who you got? Bills at the Chiefs, 2-point home favorite.
Well, I'll say this here. As a wrestling fan, I do believe in the old additive of Ric Flair. To be the man,
woo!
You got to beat the man. Josh Allen is in a prime time spot right now to beat the man, Patrick Mahomes. And I think he does it.
So are you saying that Josh Allen is the Sting to the Chiefs' Ric Flair? Is that what you're saying?
I think he does it, man. I really think he does. It's going to be an overtime game. I've been saying I thought last week's game was going to be an overtime game with the Bills and the Ravens. I thought it was going to be, because you were hard pressed to find a better quarterback matchup. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. I really don't think the quarterback fight this week is as good as it was last week. But I did say on one of my buddies' podcasts, our good friend Michael Davis, I said whoever wins this game wins the Super Bowl. And I think the Bills will win this game. They will win it in overtime, and it'll be a field goal. I think the Chiefs get what's coming to them and lose by a fluke.
So I love the prediction down to overtime by a field goal and everything. Make sure you let our old friend Michael Davis know that I'm waiting for my championship belt in our Dynasty Fantasy Football League. And make sure you remind him the fact of the fact that every team in the NFC East has now made it to a conference championship since the last time the Cowboys were able to do it. So he'll love that fact. Folks, we went late. Thanks everybody for staying with us this week. If you want to find Shannon on social media, make sure you go to X and Instagram. He is at podcast_Smitty. If you want to find me on social media, I am at Tapouts and TDs over on X. on Facebook.com/tapouts and touchdowns. And on Instagram, I am at Ryan Frick Comedy. I realize I am so sorry that you have to remember so many handles to find me on social media, but if you like me enough, you'll do it, right? What you will do if you like us enough is to make sure you follow the Cat Cave over on its social media. It's Facebook.com/the Cat Cave FFSN, and over on Instagram and X at the Cat Cave _FFSN. But until then, you may now exit the Cat Cave. But make sure you listen to more content over on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel and more Carolina Panthers themed podcasts on the Keep Pounding Podcast Network, powered by the Fans First Sports Network. For Shannon Smith, I'm Ryan Frick, and we'll see you next time right back here inside the Cat Cave.
Go Panthers.